Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. This is the show where I speak with the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I am honoured and humbled to be joined by one of the most inspirational, game-changing leaders in the world of sport and beyond. Her name is Susie Petruccelli, and I'm sure that many of you have already heard of her. She is an author and also the former captain of the Harvard women's soccer team and youth coach. She wrote the memoir Raised a Warrior and also produced the upcoming documentary with Kelly Nascimento de Lucha, Pele's daughter, and I do hope I pronounced that correctly, as well as Julie Faudry, who is the US women's national team legend. This documentary is called Warriors of a Beautiful Game, and it's all around global inequality in soccer. Susie invests in female-founded projects and startups, everything from Build and Imagine, a female-owned toy organization that designs STEM building toys for girls, as well as working and having extensive experience when it comes to programming, system administrations and web design. Oh my goodness, I feel completely exhausted talking through all of that. It is, but it's amazing. Susie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me so much. It's so nice to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you as well. And I wonder, for our listeners who know you or would love to know more about you, I should say, tell us a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing and how you came to be where you are today, because I know it's not been a smooth sailing journey.
No, it's been a bumpy ride. And so I, grew up playing soccer in the youth soccer system in the United States, and basically taking that opportunity for granted, not realizing how many girls throughout history and also currently around the world are still not allowed to play. And so I ended up with the opportunity to play soccer at Harvard, which was, an incredible opportunity beyond my wildest dreams as a child and as a young person. And then but throughout my life, I had these moments where I felt like I was being treated differently because I was a girl, but I didn't know what the term, sexism was. I didn't know what discrimination was. And no one else around me seemed to recognize those as sort of unfair things or unfair moments. So I, continued on with my life and sort of denied those feelings of injustice. And it wasn't until my 20s when I started to learn more about the history of women and the history of women's sports in particular, and kind of started to have some context for all of those moments that were happening to me in my life. And I started, to write about it and learn more about it. And that, brought me to the point where I finished my book. I wrote this book, Raised a Warrior, that came out this year. And the book led me to meet Kelly Nascimento de Lucha. And we've been working on her film, Warriors of a Beautiful Game, for the past 2.5 years. And the film is now in post-production, which is really exciting.
How exciting. You must be so incredibly proud. And, in particular, when I was doing some research and reading, watching some of the great things that you've done, what really touched me personally, and I'm sure many who get to know you through the films, through the books, through, other interviews and things like that you have done, is how you kind of grew up in this real sports mad male dominated family. Because ultimately, when we look at sport, and even if we aren't sporting fans per se, we immediately see this as a male-dominated industry. And it's the same across the board, not just in the UK, obviously in the States where you are from. But people will say things like, hey, football's back, hurrah, especially in this world that we're in at the moment. And it's like, well, maybe not hurrah, because actually male football is back. It's not female football that is back. And so I think it's, doubly as impressive to make it where you have got to from growing up in an environment where sports achievements, in particular for women, were not celebrated nearly as much as they are now. And there's still so much more work to be done, frankly, at the moment.
Yeah, there is a lot more work to be done. And But interestingly, what you were saying about how women's soccer is not quite back yet, but we actually found some really exciting developments last year, even during the pandemic. Yes, we were very concerned about the impact of the pandemic on women's sports in general, but in particular, women's soccer, because women's soccer was just starting to sort of really break through in the mainstream sports media. And, for instance, the Sky Blue team, which is the NWSL team here in New York, New Jersey, had just played their first game in Red Bull Arena. So they had just played their first game moving up to a professional arena right before, and they were set to play their whole season last year in Red Bull Arena, which, obviously was a huge accomplishment. So, there definitely were some setbacks because of the pandemic, but there also were some very, very exciting, bright moments. Actually, the NWSL in the US had more fan engagement than any other pro sports league last year. And, I think that there's a lot of very positive things going on around women's sports, mostly because of the increased use of social media and social networking and these over-the-top platforms that are allowing women athletes and fans of women's sports to bypass that mainstream sports media that we've been marginalized from forever. So, there's some, yes, it was hard, and there were some, rough spots, and some teams folded, and, we had some players that had to retire early and things like that, of course. But in terms of the long-term hopes for the game, there's a lot of bright spots.
It's really heartwarming to hear things like that, in particular how tech is being used for good. As you know, with a lot of the work we do, it's very much about how to reach audiences who would not be your usual audiences. And when I say usual, what I mean is organizations wouldn't necessarily market to some of these different demographics, or they're perceived different. Naturally it would be, marketing, for example, when it comes to football, to white guys, generally speaking. Actually, what you're talking about there is very much what we have seen in the wider world of business, and I guess society as well, is organizations looking to now market towards different demographics, and the change in digital transformation and technology that we've seen over the years. So touch wood, it continues to grow in that way. And, I must ask you as well about the ATA, or ATAfootball.com,
Yes.
which is a platform making women's professional soccer, or football as we call it in the UK, for any of the UK people listening to the podcast today, making that more accessible to all. Talk to me a little bit about this tech platform.
Yeah, so I'm so excited. Actually, today is my first day on the job at ATA Football, so I'm very excited. Yay!
Congrats.
Yeah, so basically, ATA Football was founded by these amazing women, Esmeralda Negron, who played soccer at Princeton University, and Hannah Brown, who's from Sky Sports, and basically they realized that there needs to be a way to grow exposure and accessibility for European women's soccer in the US. And there's, an appetite for it, there's a market for it. And also, the more exposure there is for younger players in the US, the more it will grow their game, and the more it will elevate our game here in the US overall. So the purpose of ATA is to stream the women's leagues, the Barclays, the Pro League in England, the Pro League in the top division in France, and the top division, the Frauen Bundesliga. And they're streaming them on their platform, atafootball.com, for free. Anybody can sign up. And they've also partnered with NBCSN. So they're going to be showing some of the games, almost like a sister programming to the Premier League here in the States. So it's very exciting. And, one of the main themes in my book, actually on page 1 of my book, I talk about how as a little girl, I always wished there was just as much soccer on TV as there was American football and American baseball. And, those are my earliest memories of not understanding why the sport that I was allowed to play wasn't getting any exposure or sort of respect. And so I feel like I'm sort of, combining my love of technology and my love of soccer, and kind of fulfilling that little girl's dream to give little girls now the opportunity to see pro women's soccer on TV.
Representation is so incredibly important, as you say there. Wouldn't it be fantastic if every little girl were to look up and see on TV game changers like you and many others, and immediately not have to search for role models?
Right.
I mean, what breaks my heart sometimes, if we're ever doing work with, we speak with, the youth and future leaders, and I've done some podcasts with, aspiring leaders of the future, and what breaks my heart is when those individuals say, "Don't see anyone like me in the boardroom environment," or "Don't see anyone like me who has made it to that point in a professional sporting capacity," in your case. And, whilst there are those who have the confidence and the gravitas like you do, which I'm sure it wasn't, you weren't born with it, you developed that resilience, but to be the first, or to be one of the few that have done it and paved the way, ultimately, there are many, many others who wouldn't have that steel to say, "Hey, I'm just going to go do it, even though I see no one that looks like me."
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that I'm appearing uber confident. It was a work in progress, and I oftentimes like recall all of my mentors, people like Dr. Colleen Hacker from the U.S. Women's National Team, and she talks about in the moments where I do, sort of get a little nervous or get those butterflies. She has a metaphor where she talks about it's okay to have those butterflies, but the important thing is to teach them how to fly in alignment. So, and Billie Jean King has a great quote: "Pressure is a privilege," right? I mean, you're feeling that pressure in the moment and you're nervous about it, but that pressure is a privilege. You've been, I've been privileged to have the opportunities to be here, be with you, and have gone to Harvard, and have, like I said, now I appreciate the opportunity that I had my whole life to be encouraged to play sports my whole life. And so I understand that all of those things are a privilege. And, I also understand that so many amazing, inspirational, strong, powerful trailblazers came before me. And I think that's really what changed my life ultimately and set me on the right course, was when I woke up to all of those incredible men and women throughout history that, did things like, write Title IX and that which changed the American sports landscape here in the United States in 1972, and gave women access to higher education, sports. So yeah, it's about, understanding who came before and understanding those role models, and, hopefully in the process, inspiring younger generations. Actually, the title of my book, Raised a Warrior, has a double meaning. My father raised me to be a warrior on the field in a very sort of kill or be killed, mentality. He called on the soccer field, he called it reckless abandon, where you sort of sacrifice your limbs for the goal or or for your team. And so, but then as I've grown up and as I've matured, I realized that, raising a warrior means raising myself to be a warrior for causes that I know need to be fought. And also raising my children now, trying to raise my children now to be warriors for causes that they, I guess, feel as passionate about as I do about the, gender equality.
I love that you've mentioned your kids there, because like you, I've got a real hope in our future generations of leaders. What's beautiful to see is that our millennials, zillennials, and beyond feel generally just so purpose driven, not only when it comes to business and other societal issues, but in where they place their energy and their effort, i.e. in causes that really truly matter to the world. And that's, it's just really wonderful, that we have such passionate and inspired young people who are willing to, I think in the main, really kind of stand up for what they believe in. And, it's a significant groundswell, I think, of young people who are more brave when it comes to putting their head above the parapet. And I guess on this note, obviously you'll have seen through the many years and through your personal and business experience what's happened over the years, not only when it comes to women's sport, but also, you know, what's happened in kind of wider society. You know, I wonder, you know, what impacts have you seen in 2020 and before that, and what do you think really kind of needs to happen when it comes to enabling us to keep the momentum growing for women's sports?
You know, I think luckily now there is definitely a global network that almost like a watchdog group of fans and, you know, stakeholders in the game, players, coaches, leagues, sponsors are very invested. And you know, I think I do believe that there's a foundation now that's not going anywhere. And so we build from here now, and we provide data that proves that, you know, there is a enormous return on your investment if you invest in women's sports. There's some really great organizations that are providing that data now, and it's very exciting what they're reporting. There's great reports coming out of Zoom. There's great reports coming out of the Sports Innovation Lab, and they're, you know, basically providing these companies that have investment dollars and sponsorship dollars with the data that shows that there's enormous, unprecedented social value in investing in women's sports. And like you were saying, there are these the new generations, the younger generations are purpose focused, and they prefer products that have a purpose behind them. And, you know, women's sports is that. It was born out of a social justice movement, right? Gender equality. So I think, you know, we just continue building, we continue working, we continue growing in the media, promoting the media. And in the same way, you know, I think it's really important to remember that these fans of women's sports are not just average sports fans. They actually become advocates for the brands that, you know, support their teams and their leagues. They've never seen, you know, what these reports have been showing is they've never seen the level of engagement and public gratitude from fans for brands that invest in their leagues and sports. So yeah, we just keep building from here, and we keep, you know, putting pressure on for change, and yeah, we keep the positive momentum going.
And what about the impact in 2020?
You know, I think actually in a lot of ways the fact that the breakdown of the system of ticket sales and sponsorships for the mainstream sports, like in the United States, it's American football and baseball, have started to, you know, we're sort of, how do I say, almost wiped down to a baseline. So it's almost like it leveled the playing field in many ways, because, you know, you're looking at any sports last year and there were no fans in the stadiums, right? It didn't matter what you were looking at. So it took away that sort of stigma that, you know, oh, well, you're looking at a women's soccer game and a male fan would say, oh, well, look, there's like 5 people in the stadium, right? I mean, it took that piece away. And so what you were really looking at was you were looking at the sport from a pure perspective, and you were looking at the sport for its entertainment and for their skill and for its, you know, its underlying value. And so I think in a lot of ways, the pandemic might have been obviously very, very hard for so many people around the world. But, you know, for women's sports, there were some benefits.
And why do you think businesses should invest and sponsor women's sport instead of traditional male teams?
So I think there's a lot of reasons why businesses should invest in women's sport. And I think, you know, primarily because of this advocacy piece and the unprecedented fan engagement of, you know, the fans of women's sports that, you know, we're seeing, especially in the last year. I think that, you know, it's a wonderful time for these companies to get into a sponsorship situation with the women's sport. Not only are they going to be earning a massive amount of goodwill from a very engaged community, but I also, you know, there's data that shows that it's just a really sound business investment.
Absolutely. And that feeds back into everything that you were saying previously about the fact that there's so much more ways now for customers or fans to be able to watch, whether it be online, whether it be different ways to consume watching the games. It would be madness, I think, for brands, and commercially madness for them not to make these investments in different demographics, different to the traditional norm.
Yeah, and I think it's exciting because these brands, the leagues, the women's leagues are very nimble. They're very willing to experiment. They're very willing to be innovative and creative. And I think it's exciting for brands to have an opportunity like that and to be problem solvers. They really do come in, they work with the league on whatever issue is, they're facing. For instance, when they were faced, with the fact that they weren't going to be able to have stands in the seats over the whole of the course of last year. And so, for instance, the NWSL partnered with Google and created the first virtual fan section in the stadium. And so I think it's really exciting for these organizations to be able to, express themselves creatively and prove that they're innovative and find these, exciting new audiences.
Absolutely. And you said it perfectly there. New audiences that they have not looked at previously. And this brings me back full circle to your book, which is obviously already available to pre-order, ready for its re-release. Previously, it was a bestseller, and it's all about women's sport. So it's proof in the pudding straight away that there is a market for this kind of content and literature and engagement.
Yeah, there's a demand for it. There's a need for it. There's now 4 generations of young girls and women that have grown up playing sports. And they want representation. They want to see stories about them. They want to participate in all areas. They don't want to be limited to just playing the game at a grassroots level. So yeah, it's a very exciting time. And, like I said, we're very lucky for the older generations. I just spoke to this woman, Carol Oglesby, in Los Angeles, who was one of the first presidents of the AIAW, which was the predecessor to the NCAA for women in the United States. And, she's 82 years old and still very, very active and supportive of the growth of women's sports around the world. So these people are just so inspiring, and I want all of their stories to be told. I want people to know about them and their history and the struggles and the triumphs that they had. And yeah, so the relaunch of the book will be in April, and I'm been very lucky. I had a lot of amazing people support me and help me through the process. And, people like you who have reached out and just given me so much love, and I just really appreciate it.
Well, I already can't wait till April. And I love the fact that you've mentioned a lady in her 80s, and we're still telling great stories about these game-changing women. And, for me, diversity and inclusion, belonging, equity, it is about not only celebration of those and storytelling of those so we can pave the way for the future, but it's also about looking at all of those different eclectic things that make up diversity and inclusion, visibly and invisibly. And, I guess I wonder on that note, and I ask this question to everyone, because I think the beautiful thing about D&I is it can mean different things to different people. But I wonder, what does diversity, inclusion, belonging mean to you personally?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So diversity and inclusion to me makes me, especially in the context of last year, it makes me think about the founding fathers of the United States, actually, and how they were not diverse and they were not inclusive, to be honest, right? They, the Pledge of Allegiance, is, talks about, land of the free and the brave, and our national anthem, talks about, all men are created equal and all these things. Might have had that backwards, but it's actually not inclusive at all. And so to me, the diversity and inclusion makes me proud that we've made so much progress, but also, it's been very slow. And, I think we all need to realize how far we still have to go. I think obviously so many people do. We just need to keep growing awareness of sort of our roots and how marginalized so many people were for so long.
Couldn't agree more. It's a combination of celebration and recognition and storytelling, yet also making sure that we don't lose the momentum and we keep that foot on the gas, which leads me to talk about action. I'd love this podcast to be a call to action for as many people as possible to really drive growth in sport. And on that note, I wonder, what are you doing to drive growth in sport, and how can we all help?
Thank you. So, I'm trying very hard to tell stories about women like Carol Oglesby and about my teammates throughout my life, including, at Harvard, who were just really inspiring women and really inspiring people, and, have gone on to do amazing things. And I think, having like intelligent, ambitious role models for little girls is one of the most important things that I can contribute. So that's where I'm focusing my efforts, and obviously trying to grow opportunities for girls outside of the regular systems for women's sports is very important to me. And then obviously representation on streaming and on TV is my other goal with Ata Football. And yeah, so basically sort of moving in on several different fronts on the battle, and just trying to support people also who are working on barriers to women in other areas in their local communities, and just generally supporting people when we find them and they need help.
Lifting each other up. Absolutely. And last couple of little lightning round questions. I gotta ask, I know that many people are thinking, how? What is your secret to success?
It's funny. I think mostly I've been very stubborn my whole life, and there were a lot of times when I just refused to take no for an answer. And I think that's, and also just age and experience. I think I've observed a lot of people and learned and been inspired by a lot of people throughout my life. And I think that's really helped me.
I love the stubbornness and not taking no for an answer. That resonates a lot with me. And finally, what advice, if you could go back in time and give advice to your younger self, or indeed someone who's in a similar position, perhaps they're thinking about what they want to do, perhaps they haven't quite found the confidence and the tenacity that they need to really take that step up, what advice would you give yourself, or someone who's listening in right now thinking, I'd love to be there one day?
If I could talk to my younger self, I would tell her that she needs to stop waiting for men to believe in her. Actually, I think that's what I would tell her. For, basically my whole life until about 10 years ago or so, I was always waiting for approval from the men in my life, my father, my brother, even my husband. And I think until I stopped waiting for that approval and started believing in myself and believing that what I felt was the right path for me was the right path for me, that's when I really started to find myself and find my people and find, a really fulfilling purpose.
Susie, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been a joy. It's been an inspiration speaking to you today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I hope that we can continue to work together, and I really appreciate everything that you're doing as well, and you're super inspiring with all of the work that you're doing. So thank you for that.
Susie, thank you so much. And in classic fashion, I always do a very brief summary, but where do I start to summarize some of the key learning points from today? One golden nugget of wisdom I thought was just amazing was not waiting for that approval and really believing in yourself. I think it's a piece of advice that each and every one of us can take, whether female or indeed male, actually, but in particular for women, not seeking the the male approval. I think it's something that many of us have done since a young age, and I think it's almost ingrained into us. So, as Susie has said, really look deep inside yourself, because it is you who is going to make that difference. It is you who needs to step up to that plate, and also find the people around you, find those other women or men or allies who are really going to make that difference. The other piece I loved, is a bit of a word out here to businesses and those in positions of power within wider society, making that true investment in female-owned businesses and female enterprises is not just a nice to have. This is great for business, wider society, for future leaders, for daughters, for friends, and for others who would love to see themselves in the places that classically men have been in the past. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the world of the future had female sports and women's football and women's soccer on TV at the same time as the men's? It is great for business as well. It's not just this kind of nice, fluffy feeling. It's great commercially, as we've heard from Susie today. A drive in exposure for women, spend that comes from females, from customers who are females, from different demographics. This is a business imperative as well as it is an investment truly within our future. And finally, make sure you keep an eye out for the pre-order of Raised a Warrior. I'll definitely be getting my copy, and I'll also be looking forward as well to watching the film when it comes out. If you're interested in finding out more, make sure you connect with Susie. You can follow her on Twitter. She's on LinkedIn as well, and she's also got a website of which we'll put everything into the show notes at the end of today's show for you to check out, as well as the show notes. If you've missed anything, don't worry at all. Everything will be there for you to check out on www.dialglobal.org/podcast. And we'll look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.